My boyfriend faked getting another woman pregnant as a payback prank. I made him the real joke. I dated John for 2 years and he was fine until he decided he had to win. He pulled little pranks all the time. He hid my keys. He set my ringtone to a scream. He told the waiter it was my birthday when it was not. I laughed at most of it. One Saturday, he woke up at my place, showered, came downstairs in his work clothes with his bag on his shoulder. I knew it was Saturday. I did not tell him. I just kept asking, "So what day is it today?" He said, "Work day, obviously." I asked again. He got annoyed and said, "Why do you keep asking me that?" I asked one more time and he looked at his watch and saw the date. He was furious. He said, "That is a bad prank. That is not even funny. I am going to pay you back for that." I told him it was not that deep and that he had dressed himself. He said, "No, I owe you one now, and mine will be better." I did not think about it again. The next day we were apart and he texted me, "We need to talk. I am so sorry. I got another girl pregnant." I texted back, "If this is your payback prank, it failed. Try harder." He wrote, "It is not a prank. I am serious. I did not want to tell you like this." I said, "John, stop. I do not believe you." He doubled down. He wrote out a whole story about a party and a girl named Ashley and how it only happened once. I said, "You are making this weird. Stop now." He tripled down. He sent me a photo of a fake ultrasound he had clearly built on his computer, with the word spelled wrong across the top. I said, "That says ultrasound. Come on." He wrote, "Autocorrect. This is real. Please take me seriously." He swore on his mom. He swore on his dog. He said, "How would you feel if I did not believe you? This is my child." He called me and put on a shaky voice and said, "I need you to be an adult about this." I told him, "I do not believe a word, and this is gross." He kept it going the entire day. He would not break. By the end of the night, I was so worn out and so weirded out that I said, "Okay, if you really got a girl pregnant, then we have to break up. That is the only thing that makes sense." And he screamed, "Ha! It worked! Pranked! You said break up! I got you!" I was not laughing. I said, "You did not get me. I never believed you. I only said that so you would stop being disgusting." He said, "No, you believed it at the end. That counts." I said, "You took it way too far and you know it." He said, "You just needed more convincing to fall for it. That is on you, not me. Do not be like this." That was the moment I was done. We broke up a few days later. He never once said sorry. He said, "You are ending a 2-year relationship over a joke. That is insane." I said, "I am ending it because you faked a baby for a full day and then blamed me." He said, "Agree to disagree. And for the record, you still owe me an apology for the day thing. You started all of this, not me." Then he went and told everyone his version. He told our friends I dumped him over a harmless joke and could not take it. Some of them believed him. For years he texted me out of nowhere. "Still think you were the wronged one? LOL. Be honest, my prank was elite. You know I won that, right? Just say I won, and I will leave you alone forever." He treated it like a game he was still winning. And the worst part was that he kind of was, because he had an answer for everything, and I just looked tired. 8 years went by, and he never let it go. He started asking the whole friend group who was wrong, me or him. He ran it like a real poll. He brought it up at every dinner. Okay, round table. Who was actually in the right, me or her? People groaned, but he would not stop until he got a vote. He was still doing it at a reunion dinner last month, going person to person, and I finally decided to end it his way. When he got to me, I said, "You know what, John? Fine. You win. You were right. I was the crazy one." He lit up. He said, "See? She admits it." Then I said, "Quiet," so only he could hear. "I mean, even Danny told me back then that you won. He said it to me in private. He just never wanted to say it in front of you because you would gloat." John's whole face changed. He needed everyone to hear that. He stood up and announced to the table, "Guess what, everyone? Danny said I won years ago." He told her himself. Danny was sitting right there. Danny said, "What? I never said that. I do not even remember what this is about." And John, instead of stopping, did the exact thing he always did. He doubled down. He said, "Yes, you did, Danny. You told her. Do not lie now." Danny said, "Dude, I really did not." John tripled down. He said, "You swore to me you thought I was right. Come on, be honest." He got louder and more certain the more Danny denied it. He pointed at Danny. He demanded Danny admit it in front of the entire table. He insisted on a thing that never happened, and he would not back off even a little, the same way he had 8 years before. And when he was fully in it, red in the face, swearing Danny had said something Danny never said, I looked at him and said, "Pranked. Consider your payback failed." The whole table lost it. John sat back down, and for the first time in 8 years, he had nothing to say. But I knew him. That silence was not acceptance. It was loading. Danny caught me in the parking lot afterward, grinning so hard I thought his face would stick. He said, "That was the funniest thing I have ever seen." His face when I said I did not remember. I laughed until my ribs hurt. I drove home feeling something I had not felt in years. My phone buzzed all night with people from the dinner calling it the highlight of the reunion. I slept. The next morning, John texted me. My chest tightened out of habit, but the message was calm. He wrote, "Okay, I have to hand it to you. That was good. You got me. Truce?" I read it 3 times. No but. No dig at the end. Just a clean admission. I texted back, "Truce." And I meant it. For 2 days, I was a new person. I was not checking my phone for his name. I was not bracing. Then Danny sent me a screenshot with the line, "You need to see this." It was a message John had sent to someone in our group. It said, "Hey, just wanted to clear the air about the other night. She set me up with Danny beforehand. They planned the whole thing together. It was not even a real prank. It was a coordinated attack. Just wanted you to know the full story." I read it 3 times. Slow. I called Danny. I said, "How many people has he sent this to?" Danny said, "I do not know, but 3 separate people have already asked me if it is true. He is sending it one-on-one, not in a group, so nobody can see he is sending the same message to everyone. He is doing the doubling down thing again." I sat down on my dining room floor, not because I was sad, because I was tired. The truce had lasted 48 hours, and that is when it landed on me. John did not send that truce because he accepted losing. He sent it so I would relax, so I would stop watching, so he could rewrite the night behind my back while I drank my coffee in peace. The truce was not a white flag. It was a distraction, and it worked. Then Talia called, and her voice was careful in a way Talia's voice never is. She said, "I need to tell you something, and you are not going to like it. John called me last night. He cried on the phone. He said you publicly humiliated him, and he has not been able to sleep. He asked me to talk to you about apologizing." I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. Then I said, "He asked you to ask me to apologize to him." She said, "I know how it sounds, but he was genuinely upset, not the fake kind." My best friend, who had heard me vent about him for years, was standing in the middle instead of next to me. She said, "I saw a video someone took at the dinner and the whole table was laughing at him. That is a lot of people laughing at one person. Maybe it went a little far." I said, "Talia, do you remember the polls? Do you remember him texting me for 8 years asking me to admit he won?" She said, "I know, but he said he feels like he lost all his friends in one night. One night, like the 8 years before it did not count." I said, "He did the same thing to me for 8 years and nobody ever called him to say it went too far." She went quiet. Then I asked her something I had never asked anyone. I said, "Did he ever tell you what the original prank actually was? Did he tell you he faked getting a woman pregnant for an entire day and then blamed me for being upset?" Long pause. Then she said, "He told me it was a small joke and you overreacted." Of course he did. That is what John had been running on for 8 years. A sanded down, easy to repeat version where he forgot a date and I dumped him for it. Nobody ever questioned it because he said it with confidence and a laugh, and I always came off as the one making a big deal out of nothing. So I told her the real one. The made-up girl named Ashley. The fake ultrasound with the typo. Swearing on his mom. Swearing on his dog. The shaky voice on the phone. A full day of refusing to break, and then screaming pranked when I said we should break up. When I finished, Talia said very quietly, "He never told me any of that." I said, "I know, because if he had, nobody would have spent 8 years telling me I overreacted." Then she asked the question that hurt more than anything John did that week. "Why did you never tell me the whole thing?" Because I was tired. Because his short, clean version was already planted. And going up against it with a long, ugly truth always made me look like the one who could not let go. So I stopped trying. But I was not letting it win anymore. Talia mentioned she was hosting a small get-together that weekend. I asked if I could come. She said, "Of course." And I knew exactly what I was going to do. Because John had made one critical mistake. He had been telling the trimmed version of the original prank for so long that he had forgotten the real details were devastating, and nobody in that group had ever heard them. The night before, I did not write a speech. I sat on my bed and scrolled back 8 years in our text history, and it was all still there. "We need to talk. I am so sorry. I got another girl pregnant." The story about the party and Ashley. The photo with ultrasound blurred across the top. The swearing on his mom. "How would you feel if I did not believe you? This is my child." The text after the breakup. "You are ending a 2-year relationship over a joke." The years of follow-ups. "Just say I won, and I will leave you alone forever." I screenshotted everyone. I went slow. I made sure each was clear and I put them in order so anyone could follow the timeline from beginning to end. Reading it laid out like that, it did not look like a guy who told a joke. It looked like a guy who could not stop. Then I screenshotted the truce message, and I pulled up the smear message Danny had sent me. I put the two side by side on my screen. On the left, John calling it done, sounding like a grown-up for once. On the right, John telling our friends I had run a coordinated attack on him. Same man, same week. I saved them together. I did not need to add anything. Tullia's place was warm and familiar. Candles on the counter, music low, a small group. Danny came. Patty was on the couch with a glass of something. Everyone was thinking about the dinner and nobody was saying it. Patty finally put her glass down and said, "So is anyone going to talk about the dinner or are we pretending it did not happen?" I said, "Yes. But I want to start with something most of you have never heard. The actual prank he pulled 8 years ago, not his version." Nobody moved. I read the screenshots out loud, in order, one by one. I held up my phone so they could see ultrasound spelled wrong at the top. I read the swearing on his mom, the swearing on his dog, "This is my child." I told them about the shaky voice. I told them it went a full day. I told them how it ended with him screaming pranked like a game show. Then I read the follow-ups, all 8 years of them. The room was dead silent, not polite silence, the heavy kind, where people are trying to line up what they just heard with the story they had in their heads. Tullia had her hand over her mouth. Patty spoke first, and her voice was flat and angry, but not at me. She said, "He told me it was a joke about being late to something. He said she could not take a joke about him being late. That is the version I have had for 8 years." Danny nodded slowly. "He told me she dumped him for forgetting an anniversary." I believed it. He said it so many times I figured it was true. Then I pulled up the last two. I held up the truce text and read it. Then I swiped and held up the smear message beside it. I said, "He sent me the truce on a Monday. He was sending this to your inboxes by Wednesday." Tullia looked up from the screen and said quietly, "He sent me one of these too." Danny said, "I had no idea she was going to say my name until she said it. I just went with it because it was true." I never told John he won. Nobody questioned him. Nobody had a reason to. 8 years of John's cleaned up version collapsed in one evening. But I knew he would not go quiet. So when Tullia's phone buzzed with him asking who was there and what we talked about, and she turned the screen to me and said, "What do you want me to say?" I said, "Tell him the truth. Tell him we read his texts out loud." It took less than an hour. He built a new group chat and added almost everyone from the old group, including people who had nothing to do with any of it, and his first message was long. "I cannot believe you all sat around reading my private texts and turned it into a trial without me there. That is not friendship. That is a mob. I deserve to defend myself." The replies came fast. "Then defend yourself. What part of those texts was taken out of context? Which part did she make up? Seriously, John, if there is another side, just say it." Simple question. He could not answer it because there was nothing to point to, so he changed the subject. "She is manipulating all of you. She has been planning this since the dinner. She is obsessed with making me look bad." Obsessed. 8 years of him running polls at dinners, and I was the obsessed one. I never typed a word in that chat. I did not have to. Danny wrote, "John, I was there for the breakup. I was there at the dinner. I have been getting your messages for weeks saying she and I planned it. We did not. At what point do you just say you were wrong?" The typing bubble appeared and disappeared 3 times. Then, "You are only saying that because she got to you first. You were always on her side." Danny answered, "I was on no one's side for 8 years. I just watched you bring it up at every single dinner." Then Patty from home in 3 sentences, "John, you told me she broke up with you over forgetting an anniversary. You faked a pregnancy. Those are not the same thing." That is when he spiraled. His messages got longer and more frantic. He wrote that the pregnancy prank was obviously fake, that nobody with sense would believe a photo with a typo, that the problem was never the prank. The problem was that I could not handle being the one who got fooled. And then the sentence that sealed it. If she had just laughed, none of this would have happened. She started everything by not being able to take a joke. 3 days after crying to Tullia about losing all his friends, he was back to it was a joke. She should have laughed. She started it. The same words as 8 years ago. And Tullia wrote one line, "John, you called me crying 3 days ago and told me she went too far. Now you are saying it was just a joke? Which one is it?" No typing bubble. Nothing. 20 minutes later, he wrote, "Fine. If this is how all of you want to be, then I guess I know where I stand. Thanks for 8 years of friendship." And he left the chat. His name just disappeared from the list. I waited for relief, and it did not come. What came was heavier and stranger. The feeling of watching someone you knew for a decade trip and hit the ground hard, and knowing they did it themselves and still wincing when they landed. Then Danny called, and his voice was careful. He said, "John just called me directly, off the group text. He wants to meet in person. He says he wants to apologize to me specifically. He sounds calm, almost too calm." I knew that calm. It was the same voice from 8 years ago, the fake shaky one, the one that said, "I need you to be an adult about this." That was his reset voice, the one he used after he burned everything down and needed someone to trust him just long enough. I said, "Be careful. When he sounds calm, he is working an angle." Danny said, "I know. That is why I called you first." I walked him through every move John would make. The apology apology that only covers the small stuff, the redirect, the just between us guys. Danny listened and then said, I will meet him, and I will record every word. Danny met him at a quiet restaurant the next evening. I listened to the whole recording myself, so I know exactly how it went. Danny sat down, put his phone on the table screen up, and said, I want to remember this conversation clearly, so I am going to record it. That okay? A pause. Then John said, yeah, sure, that is fine. He started with the apology, and it sounded real. I should not have put you on the spot at the dinner. I should not have said you told her I won. That was not fair to you. Danny said, thank you. I appreciate that, and left space. And then it came. John tilted his head and said, but I think she used you. I think she planned the whole thing to embarrass me, and she picked you because she knew you would go along with it. Danny said, she did not plan anything with me. I already told you that. John leaned in and dropped his voice like he could build a private room with a recorder sitting on the table between them. Come on, Danny. Between us. Just two guys talking. You do not think she went too far? She read my private text out loud to everyone, all because of a joke from 8 years ago. Danny did not lean in. He said, the joke was you faking a pregnancy for an entire day, and then spending 8 years running polls about who was right. You can hear John's breathing change on the recording. He said, I was not running polls. I was asking a question at dinners. It was friendly. Danny said, you went person to person and demanded a vote every time. Nobody thought it was friendly. The booth squeaked. He tried another angle, quieter. Okay, let me ask you something honestly. Do you think I am a bad person? Danny took a moment. Then he said, no, I think you are a person who cannot handle being wrong, and I think that has cost you almost every friendship in this group. Plates clinking, someone laughing at another table, and then John's voice, barely above a whisper, cracking in the middle. I just wanted someone to say I was not crazy. That is all I ever wanted. I just wanted someone to say I was not the villain. Danny told me he almost felt for him right then. He said he could see the actual person for a second, not the performance. Just a man who was tired and scared he was the bad guy in a story he had been telling himself differently for 8 years. And then John sniffed once, hard, and sat up straight, and said, and honestly, I think if we had just voted at the dinner before she pulled her little stunt, I would have won. Most people would have said I was right. There is a long pause on the recording. Then Danny, not loud, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You are doing it again. Right now. You are literally doing the thing we are talking about. No comeback, no redirect, no but, no well, no actually. Danny said he watched his face go through something he had never seen on him, and it was not anger or sadness. It was recognition. Then Danny said, I am going to share this with the group, not to hurt you, but because you keep telling people a different version of every conversation you have. This way they can hear your actual words. I expected a fight. There was none. After a long stretch of restaurant noise, John said, I think I need to stop talking to all of you for a while. Not angry, tired, like a man out of moves who knew it. Danny said, yeah, I think that is the first honest thing you have said in 8 years. Danny sent the file to the group that night with one line. John and I met tonight. Here is the full conversation. I listened to it 3 times. On the 3rd time, I noticed I was not angry. I had been angry so long I thought it was part of the foundation, but I was not, and I did not feel like I had won either. What I felt was quieter. It was the feeling of finally having proof. Not proof that I was right, because I always knew that. Proof that I was not crazy. For 8 years, he made me wonder if I was the one who could not let go, if I was too sensitive, too serious, and enough people repeated his version that some nights it got heavy even though I knew it was not true. Now I had it in his own voice, recorded in a booth in a quiet restaurant, that he would rather lose every friend he had than say he was wrong. That even in his most honest 30 seconds, he reached for the scoreboard again. That was never my problem. It was his. My phone lay face down on the nightstand all night. In the morning, the screen was still black.